So, a few people know that I've been working on some retrospectives, and two of those games are Pokemon Mystery Dungeon 2 Explorers of the Sky and Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Gates to Infinity for the Nintendo 3DS. Now, it's going to be a while before I have those retrospectives ready, but I do feel the urge to talk about them a little bit until then. Especially since today I noticed that Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX just released for the Nintendo Switch, and reviews are pouring in for that game. The Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series is very unique and special. In replaying these games, it got me thinking, wow, these games do a lot of things better than the mainline Pokemon games. Honestly, they're some of my favorite spin-off titles of all time, and not just in Pokemon. So today is the day when I go over what I think those things are. Sit back, relax, and have fun agreeing or disagreeing with me on the things that I'm about to list. The first thing that the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games do better than the mainline games is characters. The Mystery Dungeon games do so much right in making every character unique and memorable. The dialogue is typically better, and in most cases is usually interesting either by humor or story progression. There always seems to be a good mix of something funny, something sad, or something just intriguing. It doesn't feel like I'm reading samey lines over and over. It's more like witnessing a good show unfold that has a constant air of wit and cleverness. There's also a lot of character growth involved, and it spans all characters, from the character that you play as, to your partner, to the villains, and to even side characters that you see throughout the games. Obviously, when we look at the mainline games, the story is usually not very good. The characters are weak, there's no development, and everyone seems to just talk about one thing: Pokemon, and not even in a meaningful way. I would love to hear more about characters and their personal struggles, or maybe how they use Pokemon to get over those things. There's really so much depth they could explore in the mainline games, but they just don't. And that's just honestly tragic. The second thing PMD does better than mainline games is story. The stories in the mainline games are so weak that I almost feel bad even comparing them to the Mystery Dungeon series. I think it's definitely worth pointing out that the stories here in Mystery Dungeon are so good that you can compare them to some of the better stories out in general gaming, not just in Pokemon. Mystery Dungeon has deep themes and layers that make up the journey and the characters that we see throughout. There are twists and turns, but best of all, there are stakes that are actively shown. For instance, in the mainline games, there's typically a lot of talk about what would happen if Evil Team accomplished this, but we're never actually shown what would happen if they accomplished their goals. Meanwhile, in Mystery Dungeon, and to keep this spoiler free, the bad things that you've been warned about throughout the games actually end up happening more so than not. Mystery Dungeon also explores deeper topics such as loneliness and death. It really makes you feel like you live in a cruel world and are trying to just find happiness in any way you can along the way. Not only that, but you're helping others so that they don't have to experience misery. And I think these are just way more important things to go over in storytelling, more so than just catch lots of Pokemon, get 8 badge, beat Evil Team, be the very best. Number 3 is the difficulty. Everyone knows the mainline games are criticized for being too easy. But you know what? You're in luck because the Mystery Dungeon games are anything but. Matter of fact, these are some of the harder games that I've ever played. Unlike regular Pokemon, where you can just spam super effective move after super effective move, Mystery Dungeon makes things feel extra tactical. This comes from the grid layout that you have when going through dungeons, so placement matters a lot, to how many Pokemon can jump you, especially if you enter a monster house, to the hunger mechanic completely kicking your ass, and 99 floor dungeons that really test your stamina. Seriously, Mystery Dungeon makes you use every resource at your disposal to just survive. It is rough, and I could not ask for a better balance of difficulty and fun than Mystery Dungeon 2 Explorers of Time, Dark, and Sky. Again, compare this to mainline Pokemon where it's, this is fire type, must use super effective water type move, win, thank you, free. No, this is much more tactical with many more layers to the gameplay. Number 4, and I deem this to be the most important factor of what Mystery Dungeon does better than the mainline Pokemon games, and that is developer passion. If Sword and Shield is any indication, it's clear that Game Freak really doesn't give two shits about the games it's developing anymore. And sadly, they're at the mercy of having to push out releases every year. So it's no wonder they're experiencing burnout. They really should just give this franchise to another developer. The Mystery Dungeon games are developed by Spike Chunsoft, formerly known as just Chunsoft. And if you'll notice, there was actually a pretty big hiatus between Super Mystery Dungeon and Mystery Dungeon DX. This speaks volumes because it's not like the Mystery Dungeon series was ever unsuccessful. It's more so that they're not doing unnecessary releases all the time, much like the trap the mainline games have fallen into. So with each iteration, Spike Chunsoft is able to pour in every ounce of passion that they have for making these games. And it shows. There's a lot of elements when playing these games that you can tell that they went above and beyond just because they could and they wanted to. And you can tell that from the story, from the music, from the sheer number of dungeon layouts, to the sheer number of Pokemon you control in each game, the amount of requests, the amount of cutscenes, the amount of dialogue that is interesting and fun. And even now, especially with Mystery Dungeon DX, from the art style, they actually opted for a special look. The animations are expressive. The Pokemon actually wiggle individual parts of their bodies, such as their tails. These are all things that Pokemon seems to be lacking in the mainline games nowadays. Like, severely lacking. I guess the music was good in Sword and Shield. Number 5, and this is the last thing in my list of what PMD does better than the mainline Pokemon games, and that is the creation of a believable world. Now, what do I mean by this? It means Mystery Dungeon makes you feel like you're living in a world that seems just as real as the one you live in currently. Everything is constantly moving. NPCs act and react realistically. They all have real problems that are relatable. When something happens in this world, you want to help. You don't want little Azurill, who's sweet as a cinnamon roll, to be killed by Drowsy. You don't want time to stop and for your partner and everyone else you've met on your journey to just die. And even for your own character, you've worked so hard to form all these bonds with these NPCs, you don't want yourself to cease to exist in this world. The idea of that saddens you. You want to make things right in this world because they're not. Everyone you've met, you've ended up caring for because their problems were relatable and their motives were respectable. That is what I mean when I say Mystery Dungeon sets up a believable world. Meanwhile, the mainline games. Hear Pokemon, me catch, beat gym, walk through path. Press A, press A, press A, press A, press A. Boy, does the meaningless dialogue in these games ever end. Well, there you have it. There's 5 things that Pokemon Mystery Dungeon does better than the mainline Pokemon games. Do you agree with my list? Are there maybe more things you think that they do better? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But before that, don't forget to smash that subscribe button, as well as that little thumbs up to let me know I'm doing a good job. If anyone wants to join in on supporting me on Patreon, I will have the link in the description as well. Thanks, and until my next video, see ya!